So let's go over course objectives and agenda. So we're going to tell everyone about myself, and then we'll go to Pia for introducing our team. Then we'll get right into introduction to Agile. That's what we'll be going over here Monday. Tuesday will be roles and responsibilities. And then Wednesday will be key practices and techniques. So the schedule for next week is to be announced. We will vote on that. This is a 12-week course for free. And typically these courses run between $2,500 to like $5,000 to do. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because someone sent me a message earlier today and was saying that it's too much. So let me explain to everyone about time, right? You know, everyone has lives, and Pia and I, being in the agile space, we work like typical 9 to 5 hours, but it's still work that we have to do outside of the job, to make sure that everything is moving the right direction. It's a lot of thinking power, and then we all have families. So when people are charging a certain amount for these courses, it's not because they're just trying to get your money. And I'm not saying it's not everyone, because some people are just trying to get your money. Let's be clear. But people are passionate about what they do, and they want to make sure that you are dedicated to what you are trying to learn. So I just want to touch on that very briefly before we get into the training. But I'm glad you guys are all attending today. I'm excited to work with you, teach you some different things inside the company and about Scrum and Agile, and also about being Scrum Masters and product owners. So just because you're here to become a Scrum Master don't mean that you have to become a Scrum Master. You could become a product owner. You could build out your career pathway. Pia and I, we started out Scrum Masters. She's an Agile coach now. I'm an Agile consultant. Here's Lydia, 1 second. And I said this is going to happen just to give you guys a heads up. And yeah, so I'm excited to work with you guys. I know a lot of people been asking me for a while to teach a course, and now here it is. And I have taught in the past different mentees, but I'm excited to work with you guys. Peel, you have anything to say before we get into the introduction of yourself, should I say? Because I already went over a little bit of who you are, or we could save it for the next slide, the next couple slides. You're muted. You're muted.
Y'all missed it too. I had a whole lot of good stuff to say. Yeah, no, you've already introduced me mostly, like my title and my where I currently work. So I can go a little bit deeper on Wednesday.
Okay, cool.
When I do it. So yeah.
All right, sounds good. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. All right, who am I? I'll give you a little more in-depth description of who I am, where I come from. So I'm the CEO of Holliday Systems Inc. I'm your instructor, or one of your instructors, former college athlete. I used to be in the Navy, and one of the people I served with is right here. Hold on, let me let Conrad in. Well, a couple of people I served with are here. So Claude, he introduced me to Agile and Scrum. Stackhouse, we served in Afghanistan together. So welcome you guys. I used to be a federal program manager too, working with government contracts, Agile coach, business consultant now, release train engineer. That's on a career pathway after you become a Scrum Master. They get paid more than Scrum Masters do, typically. And I'm a Scrum Master mentor. So that's it all for myself. Let's go to the next slide. Pia Rolick, Director of Agile Operations, and Dominique Holliday, CEO of Holliday Systems Inc. So we're an agency. We have two parts. So what we do is, agile transformation management, using agile to help businesses grow. And also we have a marketing side, but you guys will learn more in depth on the marketing side later on different projects. Goals and objectives. So number one, learning and understanding agile and its most commonly used frameworks. So the frameworks that are most commonly used are Scrum and Kanban. You know, mostly every company will use Scrum and Kanban if they are adopting Agile. Some companies use other frameworks, but what we'll be learning here is about Scrum and Kanban. Objective number 2, train Scrum Masters and product owners to be efficient in applying Agile and its frameworks by using real projects. So the projects that you guys will be working in are real. It's real problems, real companies. This is going to be a very engaging, interactive course. You won't all start out as Scrum Masters. We will rotate that position. Some of you will be product owners, some of you will be Scrum Masters, some of you will be on the dev side. And it's not mainly technology. I am working on getting some technology-based projects, but I just want to get you guys feet wet in Agile and Scrum. So objective number 3, after completing the course, give the opportunity to work for the company or assist with finding a job. So that's putting your resume together. That is reviewing your resume after we put it together with you. And also it will be interview preps. So I'll be inviting different Scrum Masters, different Agile coaches, different people that work in corporate America to interview and try to better you to go into the work field. Lydia is having a problem joining. All right. So let's go to the next slide. First steps in becoming Agile. It's the Agile Manifesto. Okay, Mercedes. P, I gotta get your email working because I'm trying to jump back and forth here. Okay. So the Agile Manifesto is a set of guiding principles for Agile software development created by a group of software developers in 2001. It emphasizes flexibility, collaboration, and customer satisfaction. The manifesto consists of 4 key values and 12 principles. So think about this. Like if you were a software developer and you were tired of working the same way and having to redo your work if a customer was not satisfied with the product that you're pushing them. These few gentlemen went and said, let's come up with a way to better satisfy this customer so I don't have to keep redoing my work. Really, that's what it was. They're very, and it's simple, but it fixes complex problems. So it was a great thing for them to do to help with customer satisfaction. Now, the Agile Manifesto values is for individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a project plan. Now, I know it doesn't make sense to you guys right now, but once you start working and you understand these values, it'll all come together. And I do have some examples here. I won't go through all the examples. I'll let you guys read through it. But Pia, do you want to say anything on the?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking. So as you said, like I know right now it may be a little challenging to understand, but if any of you are familiar with traditional waterfall, you maybe worked in project management or just understand the typical project management, that's pretty much the difference between the two. So when it says, when you go back to the previous screen really quick, Damo, please.
Mm-hmm.
So where it says, like for example, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, or responding to change over following a project plan. The first part of that sentence is the agile portion, as opposed to doing the traditional waterfall. So basically, it's a contrast between the two. So agile is just another form of project management, but it's just a revised version. So I just wanted to make that clear that the distinction between the two.
And I'm gonna use some corporate jargon here, guys. So let me piggyback off of that what Pia just said. So the over processing tools, right? So waterfall, if you guys don't understand what waterfall is a strict way of doing work and it's no bending or adapting to anything that's happening. You know what you got to do, and it may take a year to do, but you're going to follow that process and you're going to give the client, the customer, whatever they want at that time. But the problem is their minds change over that year span. It's been a lot of customers that change their mind because of the way the world works and the way the world moves. So waterfall is just a strict way of doing work. Agile is breaking things into increments and getting feedback from the customer so they'll be better satisfied when they get their product.
Yeah. And
So
sorry, I want to use my house example.
go ahead, go ahead,
Right?
go ahead, go
I feel
ahead.
like everyone on this call, for people that when I explain to them what Agile is, and if they're new to it, when I give the house example, it usually explains it a lot better. You try to define the difference between the two. So let's just say you're coming to me, you want to buy a house, right? So you give me all the requirements, everything you want for this house up front. So I charge you this fee up front. I give you the bill. You pay me either the whole entire thing up front or a large lump sum. And I tell you that I'm going to build this house with everything that you gave me right now, and I'm going to have it to you by the end of this year. Now, this whole entire year goes, I allocate all of my resources. I've already taken all of your money. I purchased everything because you told me every single thing you wanted, right? In the beginning. Now, 6 months down the line, technology has evolved. The market trends have changed. Your interest has now changed. The problem is that you've already given me all of your money, all the money. I've already allocated all the resources. I bought all the materials. So now you can't change anything. And if you do, I will not be able to reach that deadline that I told you. Not only am I not able to reach that deadline, I'm going to now have to charge you more money, right? Because now, or you're going to have to spend more money because I've already purchased all these other resources. The difference between Agile, like Damo mentioned, is that it's incremental. So you're coming back to me, you want to buy this house again. Now you're coming to me, you give me the requirements. The difference is now I'm going to build this house in portions. I'm not just going to build it and then give it to you next year. You won't see it until next year. That's not what's going to happen. You're going to tell me what you want. I'm going to build the first floor. I build the kitchen. I build the bedroom. And now you and your family can move in. So not only are you able to start utilizing it right away, right, within 4 months as opposed to a year, but in 6 months and you decide that, hey, there's market changes, there's technology trends change, whatever, and you want to make some changes to this house, we're able to do that now because I didn't purchase all the resources. I haven't allocated or the resources, I should say, and I haven't allocated, I haven't purchased all the material. So you have the option to make those changes. Traditional waterfall, it's strict and it's confined as opposed to the flexibility of Agile. So I usually try to give the house as an example. It usually makes things very clear for those who aren't really familiar.
Thanks, Pia. She loves that house
I do.
analogy. Okay. So these slides will be shared with you guys and this recording will be uploaded so you guys can read through the examples to get a better understanding. And I may be giving you some homework tonight, so just to let you guys know. But these are examples here of each value. So now it's 12 principles, and we're not going to go through all of these principles. I really want to touch on the number one thing. And can you guys see this? I'm blocking it with my, okay, let me move this down here. So the number one principle is customer satisfaction. And that's what we just briefly spoke on. Deliver valuable software early and continuously to satisfy the customer. Now, I know you guys are like, well, you're saying agile in houses, agile and this and that. Well, how is it technology? So think about any development activity, right? Software is nothing different from building a house. It's nothing different from marketing to a company. It's nothing different. It all requires development. And once companies saw that, they said, okay, maybe we could use this to implement in my marketing agency, or maybe I can post content this way, or maybe I can build houses or anything like that. It's all about getting your requirements, breaking things in increments, and then delivering value in each step. So to get feedback from the customers, and so we call them stakeholders or business owners, it's on another level. So we could go straight down here, but I don't think that'd be very beneficial right now, especially since we got an hour. But I'm gonna let you guys read through, and if you have any questions on anything that's here, I'm gonna let you ask because I want this to be engaging. I don't just want it to be death by PowerPoint. So quickly read through it. If it's anything you don't understand, Pia or myself will try to simplify it. Is there anything that you want to call out, Pia, that sticks out?
No, but I do not necessarily. I mean, as Damo mentioned, you're going to see oftentimes things as it relates to Agile. They're going to mention software often, but that's because that's initially where it started. But also, as he mentioned, it has now migrated over to other areas. So our transition into other industries. So it's not just software any longer.
Yeah, it covers multiple industries, and especially with Kanban, like trucking uses it, logistics, seeing the board move, seeing items on the board move, and being able to identify where there's bottlenecks. That's crucial. And we'll learn about that later, but I don't want to get into it to confuse you guys.
Also, with a lot of these things, when you read down, you'll see terms like collaboration, simplicity, face-to-face communication, self-organizing teams. As we move through the training, you'll start to see how all of these things apply with the different parts of the framework. So you'll see it with the events and everything that we're going to cover this week on how important those points are.
All right. Any questions from anyone before we go to the next slide? Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Scrum framework overview. So we're going to go over Scrum roles briefly, artifacts, ceremonies, life cycle, and key concepts. And I have this city over here because Agile is expanding and it helps with the innovation across the world, across cities, across countries. A lot of companies are adopting Agile. They're going away from waterfall because it's too much time, too much money spent, not having a customer satisfied. So roles. So the roles on a Scrum team, and these roles are just for the Scrum level. We call them level ones. So you can go up in level one, level two, level three, but that gets into the safe framework. So Scrum roles are product owner, Scrum Master, and developers. No more than 8 typically on a team, because you don't want to have a team larger than 10, because then things start getting congested. You can't identify problems. You don't hear everyone. Because once you get into the ceremonies, you'll understand why you should not have like a team of 20 trying to have a daily stand-up. It's 15 minutes. It's very hard to get everyone's point across to hear everything that they're working on, and if they have any blockers, you will not be able to stay in that time box. And everything in Agile and in Scrum has to be time box. We call it leaning things out. And when you think about lean, right, think about burning fat off or waste. Let's get it out. Let's get it out the way. So we're going to lean things out. So these are the roles on a Scrum team. Now, role breakdown. So product owner. So we're going to talk about the responsibilities of a product owner and what it is. So responsible for maximizing the value of the product resulting from the work the development team. They manage the product backlog, defining and prioritizing features, and ensuring the team understands the requirements and goals. The PO acts as the primary liaison between stakeholder and the development team, making sure that the product meets the needs and expectations of the users and business. So think about the product owner as being the business, and the developers are being in the operations or the technology side. So product owner gets the requirements, and then they give them to the development team. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue tied. Development team, and then it's not the product owner's decision to say, okay, this is how you do the work. Scrum is about getting feedback from your team and understanding how it's going to get done. So they just have the requirements. The development team understands how to do the work. So they're giving insight to the product owner. The product owner is giving insight to the development team. Any questions on product owner? And Portia, I know you want to know what a product owner is. So go ahead, Pia.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so the product owner is the what needs to be done, and the development team is how it will be done. Mm-hmm. So there's a what, and then there's a how. That's all I had.
Portia, do you have? I know you're probably still at work, so I'll move on to the Scrum Master. So serves as the facilitator and coach for the Scrum team, ensuring that the Scrum practices are followed and that the team adheres to the Agile principles. We just talked about the principles. They help move and remove impediments that hinder the team's progress, support continuous improvement, and foster environment and for performance. The Scrum Master also facilitates Scrum ceremonies such as daily stand-ups, sprint planning, reviews, and retrospectives. Now, when we say facilitate, that means that having we're running the meeting, but we're trying to get engagement. We're trying to make sure that we stick inside time boxes, and we're trying to make sure that those principles are applied during those ceremonies. So, to give you an example, the daily stand up. The daily stand up used to be, what did you do yesterday? What do you plan on doing today? And are there any blockers that is stopping you from progressing, right? But that has changed over time. So it goes off of goals. Like when you're in a sprint, it's a sprint goal. So how are you going? What did you do yesterday to achieve the goal that you are to set out to do? What are you planning on doing today to progress in achieving the sprint goal? And it's just words changed around, but it makes sense once you start doing it. And is there any impediments or blockers that's stopping you from achieving the sprint goal? So, is there any questions on Scrum Master or facilitation of ceremonies? And please ask questions because we want engagement here.
Are any of you familiar with any of these terms? Like, have any of you heard of any of these terms? I know one person did mention that she had taken the Scrum Master course. I see another hand raised. Anybody else? I'm just curious to see if this is new, extremely new, or if any of you have any. I see a few hands. Okay, nice. So yeah, so just a quick summary, as you all pretty much just learned that. So the product owner is from the business side. The product owner pretty much owns the vision of the product. So they gather all the information from either the end user or the stakeholder. And they're the ones that's supposed to come and provide us with the information, or the tech side, I should say, with the information. And make sure it's provided in a way that we understand from a user's perspective. Also, it should be prioritized in a way that provides the most value. That is the responsibility of the product owner. And then the Scrum team analyzes those requirements, and then they determine the most efficient way to deliver it. And we'll cover that moving forward. So basically, the product owner is responsible for the product backlog, and then the developers are responsible for the sprint backlog. And that's when the work is actually being developed from the requirements that was given to them by the product owner from the business side.
And the Scrum Master, their role is to make sure that everything committed to is getting across that finish line by removing impediments, by staying engaged with the team, and staying engaged with the product owner on things that the team needs, whether that's information or communicating that the time that they're working is not being allocated towards what needs to be done. Because sometimes when you're on a Scrum team, developers may be pulled in different directions, but you have to protect your team as a Scrum Master and say, well, I can't say yes to that. Let me run it by the team. Like if someone comes to the Scrum Master, and if a developer, say another department reaches out to a developer and says, "Can you come help me?" That developer can say, "Well, I have to check with my team first." And then the Scrum Master will go talk to that person and say, "Look, this developer cannot come to your team to help because we have commitments that we are trying to make sure move across that finish line." So let's get into developers on the Scrum team. So developers on the Scrum team are responsible for delivering potentially releasable increments of the product at the end of each sprint. They collaborate, design, develop, test, and maintain product, ensuring high quality and functional outcomes. Developers are self-organizing and cross-functional, collective, taking ownership of the work and committed to in each sprint, continuously improving their skills and processes. So I know that's a mouthful, but to further elaborate on that in simpler terms is So the developers are taking care of all the development activities. That doesn't have to be software. So let's say, like, we go back to the PIA analogy, building a house. Say you got 5 people that does construction. Those construction workers are going to put the frame out, put the cement down, all of that stuff. Now, what if you have another house being built on another team or another block that is under the same company? One team may say, well, I know this guy does this. Let me go get him from that team. But the Scrum Master will say, well, he can't go to your team right now because we're working. But if he finishes what he's working on, then I'll ask him if he feels comfortable going to your team to help. So that's what we do as Scrum Masters. We stay in communication with other teams and the product owner and the development team. So we have to make sure that we protect the team and those commitments, because at the end of the day, the business is going to say, why didn't this get finished? And you have to have a legit reason why that didn't get finished. Now, some things are out of your hand. Go ahead, Pia.
Yeah. Also too, when you start to learn more or you read information about Scrum Master, it always speaks about us removing impediments and facilitating meetings and that kind of stuff. And but in our reality, it's way more than that. When you actually start working as a Scrum Master, I really consider it as a process specialist. From my experience, we really have to pay attention to workflows and process. So when we'll move forward, you'll learn about the frameworks, right, and the different events and everything. But we're not just facilitating in a way where, because what can happen is they often think that if it's not done correctly, they'll often think that you just schedule meetings, but that's not what you do. You have to make sure when you're in these meetings that these people are staying within the agenda. They're asking the right questions, right? So it's kind of like you're from the outside looking in. All right. So I just want to make sure that you understand when you leave here that you're not just a facilitator. You're not just removing impediments. You are also trying to improve the process in a way that makes it more effective. You want to increase productivity and make it more efficient. So sometimes you may have to, make adjustments to the way that the team is doing things. But yeah, I wanted to put that out there, that it's not limited to that. You do a lot more. So think of it more as a process specialist, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then let's put a side of data analytics too, because you're going to be analyzing charts. You're going, and that's the flows that Peter is speaking about. So you got to gauge velocity. You got to gauge on how much work the team can bring in. You got to teach them how to use story points effectively and efficiently. So you are going to be looking at data. You are going to be reporting to leadership. You are going to be doing all of that. But it's not to say like you're telling on anyone. It's just to show transparency inside of your team so you can get help if it is needed. So
yeah and in all reality, what the additional parts that we're pointing out is what's going to make you stand out amongst the regular Scrum Masters, right? So when you are focusing on data and you're able to create things like dashboards that we're not going to go into right now, but you're able to read the data to help improvements, and you're able to help with process improvement, those are the things that are going to make you stand out amongst regular Scrum Masters. That's where your value is going to come in, because you'll realize working as a Scrum Master, most of what you do is not tangible. So like where a developer will create software and the teams can see they've created software. So that's their value. They were able to code and create software. As a Scrum Master, most of what you do is from your mouth and the way that you think and interact with people. So in order for you to deliver your value and let your team see, let your manager see value, it is all in the way that you interact with people and the way that you help improve in efficiency and eliminate waste. And it has to be visible. And the best way to recognize that is going to be in that data that Damo is mentioning. So just keep those things in mind. Yeah, we move forward.
I see. Leslie, do you have a question? I see your hand up.
No, sorry.
It's fine. All
I
right.
think her hand was raised from earlier, probably.
All right. So Scrum artifacts. And I'm not going to go through all of these. I know we have about 25 minutes left. But these artifacts are terms and things that you need to know. So let me go to one very important. And I don't have definition of ready up here, but definition of done. So A shared understanding of what it means for work to be complete ensures transparency and quality by providing clear criteria that must be met for an increment to be considered done. So when we speak on increment, that could be a large increment, or that could be a small increment. That could be a piece of work, but it needs to be finished. So, and that goes with acceptance criteria and different things, but these things stand out because you have to abide by these artifacts and go by and understand these artifacts, not say abide by, but some of that reporting that we touched on that Pia was speaking about, burn down charts, burn up charts, release plan. These are the reports that we look at and that we put together and we analyze on a 2 week increment in sprints or over a sprint time duration, or even a quarter or a PI. I know some organizations don't do PI planning. They don't do things like that. Releases are common in software. Like I just said, I was on a release from 10 to 6 Saturday, which that's not common either. But 10 to 6, you got to think, why was I on a release from 10 to 6? If I'm working for Blue Cross Blue Shield or working with Blue Cross Blue Shield, when are you most likely not to be on your phone? From 10 to 6, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. So when you have a release, that means you are implementing something that your team has developed into production. And you are the user. So if we were to do that in the middle of the day, so many people would have been calling saying, my app doesn't work. My website is not working. My website is down. I can't make my payment for my insurance. So just want to touch on that. Please go through these artifacts, read on them. Pia, you have anything to say on the Scrum artifacts?
Yeah. So okay, so just looking at the list that he has here, just notice that it's in a sequential order. Okay, so I want to go over it briefly with you guys so you guys can have a full understanding of what these items actually mean here. So the product backlog is what I mentioned earlier, where we saw the product owner. The product owner is the owner of the product backlog. So the product owner is responsible for filling in this backlog with the requirements that they pulled from the stakeholders and from the end users. All right. So it's a list of all the requirements needed to develop this product. The sprint backlog, as I mentioned earlier, is owned by the development team. The sprint backlog are the items that the development team pulled from the product backlog, and those are the items that they've agreed to work on to create the next line, which is the increment of work, right? So the increment of work is basically portions of work, portions of the product that are being completed as opposed to us completing the entire product, going back to the analogy of the house, right? So yeah, so that's the increment. And then there's the definition of done. And I'm going to ask if you have any questions, but I wanted you guys to see that this is in sequential order, so you can understand how the flow works, because everything is a flow. As I mentioned, it's a process, right? So product backlog, sprint backlog, then there's the increment of work. That increment of work, when it's finished, now it has achieved the definition of done. And that is the product increment. That means a portion of the product that is now completed. Does anyone have any questions about the sequence or this flow?
The floor is open.
No questions? Everyone, you guys fully understand it? So if I did a test right now and I asked somebody right now and I took the screen down, I said, what is an increment? You guys got it?
I have a question. So what happens if we fall off and we're not doing it in their time frame? What happens then? I mean, does it go to the side? I mean, what happens? Like say you've got a developer and we're supposed to be working on this part of the project, and we got that part of the project done, but we couldn't get the second part of the project done.
Mm-hmm.
Does it restart the
Yeah.
sprint? Does the sprint restart again? I mean, you understand what I'm
No,
saying?
that's a very good question. Yeah. So ideally, there's a few things that you want to consider before you actually start an increment, right? So everything that you bring into the sprint backlog, normally you would try to use the metrics to determine what the team is capable of working on within that increment. Now, sometimes we'll take the items in and we're still not able to complete them. So it does happen. Ideally, what you would do at the end is you would reassess right? So the items that are complete, you will close those out. Any items remaining at that time, you will reassess, double check with the stakeholders or the product owner to see if whether or not it is still priority. Should we keep it back in the backlog, or do they want us to continue working on it and bring it over to the next sprint? In most cases, you usually bring it over to the next sprint. Now, it does happen often, but over time, the team will start to have a better understanding of their velocity, which is a metric you guys will learn later, or the team's capacity, which is another metric. But those two things will allow the team to better understand the amount that they can take in within that increment.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
I got my hand up here. I have a question. No, I'm joking. So I do want to elaborate on that a little more. The rollover, right? So like Pia was just discussing, the velocity, that's something key. So if your velocity, and this is the amount of work that you take in, and you're always hitting that mark, 100, 100, 100, 100, what does that mean? I'm asking the group, like, if you always meet it, do you think that's good that you are always meeting every single thing that you are committing to? Like, you're completing everything in the sprint. Do you think that's a good thing?
No.
So why is that, Leslie?
Well, I mean, I'm just going off of my work experience that I have now. I mean, I would say, I mean, if somebody's given me 100% every single day, and I mean, it's just human beings. I mean, we're going to push them for 110% because they gave me 100% every day. So now I'm going to give them, I want 110 from them. I mean, that's just the way it goes.
Great. So that is correct. It is not good to have 100% committed and delivered every sprint. The cushion, or the what's the word I'm looking for? The
Buffer.
yeah, the buffer, it'll be between 80 and 100. If you hit 100, that means you got to add more work. If you're right at 80, that means, okay, let's try to get over 80. But if you're consistently saying, okay, we committed to 10 things, we completed 10 things. If you do that 3 times, your stakeholders, your managers, they're going to say, okay, what's going on here? Like, what are you guys doing? So, okay, the quality of work may be questionable at 100% every time. No. So the quality of work. So that's something that we emphasize in Scrum. That's why we're working in smaller portions. So at 100% stat, you should still have good quality because you have peer reviews inside of your development team. And then it has to make it past the product owner before it goes to complete. And we'll talk about going through workflows and things like that. So if you're hitting 100%, that quality should still be there. Even if you're at 80%, that quality still should be there. That just means that you did not finish the work to meet the acceptance criteria to have 100% quality of whatever you're pushing out. And that's why we have acceptance criteria.
Yeah, but I do think that was a good point, because if the team is not focused on quality, then they will likely get a chance to, they might hit it 100% all the time if they are jeopardizing quality. So that it was still definitely a good point.
Yeah, it's still a great point. And the product owner and the Scrum Master, we're working together to make sure that that quality is upheld. So you think about it. If I'm a developer, P is a developer, let's say Portia's the product owner and Leslie's the Scrum Master. Now, we are going through the acceptance criteria or that story, making sure that everything meets that. Now, if I'm working on it, I'll let Pia review my code or whatever I'm working on before I even make it to Leslie or Portia. So I said Leslie was the Scrum Master, so Portia. So I'm doing peer review. I said, I finished doing this. Pia, can you look at it to make sure that it is working correctly? Pia say, okay, yeah, I'm gonna look at it. Now, if Pia comes back to me and say, you need to fix this, this, and that, I'm not gonna be upset. I'm just gonna fix it, and then I'm gonna say, okay, I'm gonna get someone else to review it. And if so that other person reviews it and says, okay, good to go, then we're going to push that to the product owner. Now the product owner is going to review it as well. Do you get what I'm saying? Am I making sense to everyone?
So you mentioned acceptance criteria. I know so many people will be listening. Okay, acceptance criteria, acceptance criteria. Could you just do a little elaboration of what an acceptance criteria is, so we can understand?
Are you asking me, or you say you're going to do it, Claude?
No,
I'm
no, he's
asking you.
asking. Yeah. He's asking. Acceptance criteria is basically like a checklist of like maybe like functional and non-functional requirements that, so this way the team knows exactly what the work is supposed to do. So without that checklist, they won't be able to determine whether or not they've actually achieved the goal. So when you're provided with a user story from the business side, it's written in a user's perspective, right? So the user perspective as a user persona on what they expect the item to do. And then the acceptance criteria is basically a list, and it can kind of vary, but it's a list or checklist so the developers can refer back to it to make sure that they are meeting that criteria of what's expected for that user story, if that makes sense. So like say if somebody you're designing a website and you want to create a login, right? So the user story says, as a client, I want to be able to log into my account. So now you're creating this login page as a developer, and maybe the acceptance criteria would say something like, client should be able to log in with username. Client should be able to log in with password. Client should be able to have 3 failed attempts before locked out. A client should be able to receive email confirmation or something like that. So this way they know, the developers know exactly what's required in order to achieve the definition of done at the end of that increment. Does that make sense?
Claude, you have your hand up.
But for the person who asked, was that clear? Was that
No,
cool?
it's very clear to me. I was asking for the team. It's very clear to
Okay.
me.
So everyone
Yeah, I
else.
understand. I was asking for everyone else so they can understand what an acceptance
Got it.
criteria is. And
Thank you.
also, who writes the acceptance criteria? It's not like the story comes with an acceptance criteria already attached to it. No, the developers, the team, they sit together, and then with the product owner and maybe the business analyst. Some teams might have business analysts and others. You guys sit together and you decide that acceptance criteria, because that's how some stories will come. Like, okay, at the end of the story, how do I accept this story as completed, following the checklist that Pierre said, right? So it entails a little bit of communication between the team members and the product owner, and
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and Claude he's a Scrum Master. Just to let you guys know.
Yeah, I was
Like
ready to
Pierre,
say.
yeah,
He's obviously.
yeah, he's a Scrum Master. He'll be teaching
I don't think I
Tuesday.
met Claude.
Yeah, you haven't met him. He's in the group, but he'll be teaching Tuesday. Okay, I know we're running out of time, and I want to be able to cover everything. So
Hi.
I have refinement, planning, daily Scrum, review, and retro. Now I'm gonna tell you guys why I have an asterisk beside refinement, right? So refinement isn't a part of the regular, I'm not going to say regular. Yeah, I'll say regular 4 ceremonies, right? Refinement is not something that you are say, okay, I'm going to schedule this refinement right here, right now. No, you can refine as much as possible. So if a product owner wants to schedule 2 refinements in a week, they can do that. If they want to stay on a consistent schedule with refinement, they can do it um, right after sprint planning. But refinement, you are trying to refine to have the work ready to go for the next sprint. You're not refining the work once it gets inside of the sprint. That's a no-no. You don't do that, because once you commit to something, you're saying, I understand it. I understand the work that needs to be done. I am sure that I can complete it. And that's what we are trying to get to. Claude, do you have a hand up again, or did you not put your hand down? I'm a little confused right
Claude and
Oh,
Leslie.
sorry, hand down.
now. Leslie, do you have your hand up?
No, hers has been there too.
Okay.
Mine's been
So
sorry.
I just wanted to touch on refinement because we're running out of time. So planning, daily Scrum, review, and retro, and we're going to get into these now. So refinement, I just touched on refinement a bit. I'm not going to read through this, but I'm going to just briefly touch on each one so we don't run out of time, because we have 10 minutes left. So planning, sprint planning, we're planning the sprint. So that comes after refinement. Okay, refinement, you're getting everything done. You're trying to say, oh, product owner say, look, this is what we need to move into the next sprint. All right, now we're getting to sprint planning. What can we commit to? After everything that's refined, and you want to refine as much as possible because you want a healthy backlog, product backlog to pull up. So get into sprint planning. What are we committing to? Okay, do we need to move anything out? Is there any dependencies that any of the stories or have before we even say that we can't commit to work on the work? Now, that is the planning of the sprint. And after sprint planning, you should have a sprint goal that the developers can focus on. That is very strategic when you come to doing the work, because that keeps you in line of as far as what do I need to focus on, because it could be a bunch of different things that have conflicting priorities. And then I'm gonna let you guys ask questions as I get through this. So daily stand up, make sure it stays in that 15-minute time box. This is what we talked about, being very lean. So we don't want to waste time talking about things that don't matter in this. It's quickly get in, get out. Let's talk about anything that is stopping us. And then we call them parking lot items. I heard them called parking lot items, seconds, 16-minute items, things like that. You take that outside of the 15 minutes. So if you finish early, then you can talk about some things, but you want to take those side conversations and have those conversations with the people that you are talking to or that you need to talk to on that call. So you don't want to say, okay, I'm gonna give you what I'm working on. I'm gonna give you what I plan on doing today. Now let me tell you about my dinner. Now let me tell you about my drink. Or let me tell you about what I was going out. No. We're not doing that. People have, on average 2 minutes to give their input in this meeting or this ceremony. We don't call them meetings, we call them ceremonies. So 2 minutes, you got 2 minutes, go. So if I said, let me see who's on, Lydia, I'm asking you in 2 minutes, can you explain what you're working on today? What did you work on? Well, what did you work on yesterday? What you're working on today? And do you have any problems that you need resolved? In 2 minutes, can you do that?
Yeah.
Now, in 2 minutes, can you tell me about everything that you're doing for work in 2 minutes?
Yes.
Not possible.
She
Everything
said,
you're doing
You
is
know,
you're
not
not at work, are you?
and at the same time, let me chip into what Dominic just said. Because it's a daily Scrum ceremony, it doesn't mean you go there and as a Scrum Master, you stay silent or you're not paying attention to what your team members are telling you, your developers are telling you, because they test you. Your developers are like your kids at home. When you tell one no, he's gonna go to the dad and be like, "Hey, I need this." So they test you, and you need to pay attention to what they're saying, and like that, you should be at times, instead of you asking them, "Hey, Dominic, can you tell me what you did yesterday? What you plan on doing today and the next 24 hours or any roadblocks?" You can instead start it by asking him a question from what he said yesterday. Now you've already confused him. If he wanted to tell you the same thing, he's stuck. He doesn't know what to say because they're going to test you. You need to pay attention. And in most of those calls, from what you get from the scores, that is when you go to maybe stakeholders meetings and they're asking you questions from what your team is doing. How do you know the information that your team is doing? It's because you listen during the daily Scrum ceremonies. You're able to take notes and you have a first-hand idea of what the team is doing. You can always go back and ask your developers, like, "Hey, what are you doing today?" and all of that, if you didn't understand what they said. But then pay attention during these particular calls.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I agree with that.
go ahead,
Sorry.
Pia. Go
No, I
ahead.
was just gonna say, I definitely agree with that. So like he said, definitely you take a back seat, but you want to pay attention. In addition to everything that he said, another thing is too, if you're not paying attention, you won't be able to help with any blockers or roadblocks that they have because you won't be able to identify it. And you'll notice that sometimes developers will quickly speak about it, but not everyone is proactive. So you want to make sure you pay attention so you can be that person to make sure that you're helping move those blockers out of the way.
And let
No, speak
me
about
tell
it. And when you don't do anything tomorrow, they'll say you're the worst Scrum Master they've ever had because you're not helping them execute their own
you.
work.
I was just about to say, Claude. So I'm gonna tell you, especially coming onto a new team and trying to implement something that they already don't want to do, they're going to be looking for reasons why they should not do it. And I'm gonna give you another hack to doing this. Make sure everyone on your team is updating comments.
Yeah.
So, and they don't like doing it, but after they give their spew and you go back and look, reach out to that person and say, "Well, I see you didn't update your comments. Can you kind of give a short description of what you're doing or like anything that you're running into?" And that'll help you. And then after with those comments that are updated, make your own little backlog or take notes and put it up somewhere so you can revisit it and see if it's moving, because you will have a block column or a block label or something like that that you need to follow up. And I know it's like, well, why do I need to follow up? Because that is your job. Your job is to follow up and to help this team keep moving. They don't need to sit
Mhm.
on a whole bunch of meetings. They already have enough meetings to sit on. They need to be heads down in code and development and in doing the work that they specialize in and helping each other do the work. You
Mhm.
are the key to helping everything move. So, Phil, you have anything to say? I'm about to move to the next slide.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Review. This is the chance to show off to stakeholders. So you've been working on this, and most developers get really excited about the work they do, but they don't really like to speak a lot until it's time to really get into the weeds of the technicals. So this review is done in many different ways. But what you can do is build a shell out, speak until you hand it off to a developer, which the only thing they want to do is talk about what they've coded or what they've developed. And once they do that, you get it back and then you move to another person. So this review is to show off your team. This is to highlight things that they work on. Is to get feedback from stakeholders just to see if they like what is going on. And sometimes they might not like it, but that's good. It's not a bad thing because as long as you stick with meeting the acceptance criteria and the product owner lays out what needs to be done, then it's okay for them to change their mind. But once they change their mind, it's up to the team to come back and say, okay, can we put a how high of a priority is this? Like Peter touched on earlier. Like, can we pull this into the next sprint or do we need to work on something else? So that's the review. Do you guys want to talk about the review before I move to the next slide to the retro? Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Claude.
So my question to the team or to everyone here, apart from Pierre and you, Dominic, is after a review is completed and then during our planning session, the product owner comes and tells us, hey, stakeholders did not like this. This is what they want right now. What would you as a Scrum Master do?
Anybody can speak. Just raise your hand.
Do they go back in and have a whole nother meeting and review again and come up with um a different sprint? Is that like because they're not satisfied with it? Go in and modify it?
So, Lydia, so I'm gonna explain the sprint and the review. So there's only one review per sprint. You can't schedule reviews um, like one-off reviews. So to answer your question in a sense, and you could elaborate on your question again, but you can't schedule, like, I think I heard you right, but you can't schedule multiple reviews inside of a sprint. You have one chance to show off what you've been working on.
And you saying like you said if they his question was if they wasn't satisfied basically with
Yeah, it
everything.
sounds like it sounds like he said
Oh
if
yeah.
they weren't satisfied with the review, but they came back to the next sprint planning session, the product owner said they weren't satisfied with the previous review. What would you do? That's what it
So
sounds like
let
the question
Well, since we
maybe.
can't redo it, do you still got to move forward?
so you always move forward, but we have to specify what exactly were they not satisfied with. It's not the whole review. It'll be maybe a specific thing that we developed inside of that sprint that they're not satisfied with. Now, what did they not like? We got to be very small and we call it smart, right? So we got to be smart about what we do. And I'll break that down. I just don't want to run out of time. So if they come back and tell us, they say broadly, I don't like the review. We're going to say, well, what part of the review do you didn't like? Then they're going to say, well, I didn't like that button that you developed. What did you like? Did you not like about the button? So these are conversations that's going to go back and forth. So now they say, I just didn't like the font and the color. Can you guys change that? Now we have something to start with. And it's up to the product owner to communicate that. So if the stakeholder is saying that, the product owner is supposed to ask all of these questions so they can bring it to the team so they don't have to ask all of these questions. So you see how it works? Everyone has a specific job that they're doing to get inside of the sprint. So it's not just like they say, "Oh, I don't like any of that you guys display." I hope they don't say that because we got the requirements from you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Like, it really all depends on the situation, because if we follow what was given to us in the requirements and the acceptance criteria, then now it needs to go back to the business. They need to reassess on how they're providing their information to us. Do they really know what they're looking for and how they're presenting it to us if we follow the instructions? So, and then also, if for any reason, let's just say, hey, they want us to redo it. Okay, now we have to negotiate, because now what's going to happen is we were planning on working on other items on the next sprint. We had a deadline, we forecasted this, but now you want us to redo this. Is it still a priority? And if so, we may have to compromise, right? Because now we may not be able to work on some of the other items. So that's when you start to negotiate. That's a little further in a conversation, but oftentimes you will have to negotiate with the business on what you are capable of working on versus what you're not. So it depends on the situation.
So,
And
and I want to touch.
that's absolutely correct, yeah. And one thing I always advise is, as a Scrum Master, you need to make your product owner like your best friend. Have
Mhm.
one-on-one touch basis with your product owner every week, because there's so many things that the business is going to change their mind on. And if you are not one-on-one with your product owner to have a sync on what they want, you don't want the product owner to surprise you during your planning session, like, hey, this is what we want, or this is what we want. If you have had that one-on-one with them, you'll be fine, because you already have an idea and you know how to present it to the team. Team members, they hate when they're already working on something and they've already kept their code together, and then you just want to change it at once. They are going to fight with you on that.
Yeah. And I know we're a little over right now, but I want to say one more thing on this. One reason the business will not change their mind on a lot of things or say, I didn't like anything, and if they do, somebody getting fired, is because funding will have to go up the longer that they say they don't like something. They have a certain amount of money allocated to certain amount of projects. And once you start getting in the red, then something has to happen. So we all have to work together to make sure that we are meeting requirements and not spending a whole bunch of extra money. So that's why you have smaller teams. The business, they don't want to spend a lot of money. They're already spending a lot of money for you, for your developers, for the product owner to do good at their job. So that's one reason why, if they do come in, they should already know that the product owner knows how to communicate what they want, the Scrum Master knows how to run the team, and the developers know how to do the work. So,
Right. So basically, the product owner has to truly understand what the end users want. They need to really
mhm,
understand the customers very well. They need to be able also to articulate that in a way that the tech team can understand. Because oftentimes the tech speaks tech, business speaks business. So they have to work together. And if there are instances where they're not business analysts to help with that, it's all about the collaboration and communication. And it's also about well refining. We mentioned those refinement sessions. That's why they're so important, to have those conversations to make sure we have a full understanding before we start to work the work. Because even though there's a budget, they also want value. So they want to make sure they're getting what their customer asks for as well, because they don't want to compromise on value either.
so we're all right, 5 minutes. So we got 3 more slides. All right, retrospective. this can be fun or it can be a
That's my
headache.
favorite one.
It could be fun or it could be a headache. So what I mean by fun, managers don't come to this. No stakeholders come to this. This is just your team. And yeah, you guys talk about what went well, what didn't go so well, what you can improve on, any ideas, and you come up with action items. Now this can go on tangents, really, because if your development team doesn't really like what's going on, they're going to let you know in this meeting. They're going to be very open to saying whatever they want to say. But you, as the Scrum Master, you have to make them feel good and make them feel heard as well, and while staying inside of that time box and while staying inside of that portion that you're discussing. But you want to be very engaged into the retrospective. I know Claude, he likes the retrospective. Pia does too. I mean, I like the retrospective, but I've been on teams where they don't do anything but complain the whole time during the retrospective.
Yeah.
I call it the good, the bad, the ugly of the team. And during my retrospectives, you don't talk, you're gonna talk. I don't care who you are because I'm going to call your name. I'll put you on the spot so you can say your mind. Because the quiet people on the team are the most dangerous people on your team. So you need to make them be able to talk. So that's why I call it the good, the bad, the ugly. And
You don't want a Jason on your team. Quiet,
Let,
ready to
let me say,
kill.
no, mine is a little different. So he is right. There are often times where people don't want to speak. You'll have developers who are really just not the type to communicate verbally too often. But I did notice that with some teams, some people you don't want to necessarily force them to speak. Put it like this. So what I do is I allow them to write anonymously because some people, a lot of times when you're talking about pain points or if they have complaints, not everyone is comfortable with speaking out loud and
Mhm.
expressing that from the team. And you have to recognize that with your team, or else you won't get anything out of those people. So I do give them the opportunity to write anonymously, and then I'll read it out loud. And sometimes if I read something and I see it's a pain point or an issue, I'll read it out loud. And I say, does anyone want to elaborate on this? And if I get silence, I won't force them. I'm just glad that they shared it. And then I'll go ahead and we'll try to openly discuss it with the team. So it all depends. But I do agree with Claude that I do want everyone to participate. And in order for me to do that, sometimes I have to give them the anonymous option.
Yeah, and
so let
I'm
me
gonna
ask
let
a
you
quick question. Let me
go
ask a
ahead.
quick question for 1 minute for everyone. So if you go on your retrospective and you find your manager and your developers managers in the retrospective, what are you gonna do?
Ask that again, Claude.
So my question is, Dominic started the call by saying something, but now the question is, if you go on your call and maybe your developers forwarded their meetings to the managers and the managers are on the call and you are also on the call and your manager is on the call, how do you as a scrum master deal with that situation?
And he's not asking me. He's asking you guys. So
Yeah.
anybody, it's no wrong answer. You guys, it's not. It's like, oh, that's wrong.
Well,
No, we want to see. Go ahead, Pia.
I guess how you would handle it is not wrong, but whether or not they're supposed to be there would be right or wrong answer. So I guess the first question is based on what Damo started the conversation with on the retrospective. Are they supposed to be there? He did he introduced this part of the portion by explaining to you guys who was supposed to be on in the retrospective. Does anybody remember who he said the retrospective is for? Only for?
Engagement part. Are you listening? So who is the retrospective for? Kyle.
No management, someone says. Anybody else remember who's supposed to be on in the retrospective? Who's it for?
Gotta see Portia writing something.
The team. It's for the team,
It's for
the
the
whole
team.
team.
So back to Claude's question. Okay, so then obviously the upper management, your management is not supposed to be on the call. So now he's asking you more of a professional question of how you would handle that.
So if your manager and upper
What was
management
that?
is on the call as the
Am I
Scrum
what?
Master, what
I
would you
can't
do?
hear her phony. Yeah. Sorry.
So what would you do if your manager is on the call?
Let me say something really quickly. The way you guys are sitting on this call right now, quiet behind your cameras, is the same thing you're going to go through in your retrospective. And let me tell you, talking to yourself is going to drive you crazy in your retrospective. So right now, we're sitting here, we're asking you questions. I feel like I'm in a retrospective. This is what the developers do. This is why it's so important. You'll see when you're working with your development teams, you're often going to want to have their cameras on, because people hide behind the cameras. You're not sure if they're listening to you. They're not sure if they're learning anything. They're not engaging. And then you get nothing from the call.
Yes, Kyle, you're absolutely correct. You asked them professionally if they could let you take over the meeting, right, with your team. But guess what? Some managers, especially the Indian managers, they'll want to stay on that call because they want to listen to what you guys are discussing. Me
So
as a
let
Scrum
me
Master, let me just give you an answer. What I've done and what I've done before, I've asked them, like, hey, can you please drop the call? It's just for my team. And I told them what a retrospective is all about. It is the good, the bad, the ugly of the team. Just for me and my team members. You understand? And they refuse to hang up. So normally we have a team, a group for the team where we can communicate, like Slack and all of that. I just simply sent out a new invite to my team members over there, and then I ended the other call.
Wow.
And then I told my team members, do not forward the retrospective to your managers or any other manager. The other calls, you can forward them, but this particular call, do not forward it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna touch on that too. So if you are if you're just getting your feet wet and being a Scrum Master, and Claude is right, you can do that. But if you have been there, let's say you've been there 6 months to a year, then do that. Yes, do that. But if you are new, I'm gonna give you some advice. Have your meeting and then take the manager to the side and say, look, this meeting is for my team so I can figure out how to better support them. And I don't feel like they're going to be open to speaking freely if you're there.
Mhm.
So I'll keep you in the loop, but I'll really appreciate it if you let me facilitate this meeting with just my team. And sometimes you got to kind of be like soft with people because you will
Yeah.
have some managers that's like, oh, I just want to see what's going on. Why I can't be here? That's not the time and place to be fighting back and forth. You let them know outside of that meeting in private what you're trying to do and how it's going to benefit them in the long run.
Yeah.
So,
At the
And
same
and
time,
that's because you're a
at the same
coach. So remember, you're going to be coaching everybody. You're not just coaching the team. Right now, what Damo just said, he's coaching the manager on what Agile is and what these events are. So that's going to be your job. Your coaching is not limited to just one group. Your coach is more broader than that. You're coaching everybody, management, business, and tech.
okay, let's
at the
let's let's
same
go to
time,
the
last
next
one,
slide,
Dominic.
Claude. Yeah,
Let
go
me
ahead.
just
Go ahead.
something.
Quick.
At the same time, introducing the meeting and telling the managers what it's all about. The team members, your developers, they already know, they already understand what it's all about. So when you ask the question, nobody speaks. All of them, they just stay quiet. And you're like, oh, what went well during the spring? They are going to appreciate each other for the work they did during the spring. Now, when you talk about what did not go well, everybody's going to sit silent, but they have a lot to say. They're sitting silent because they don't want to talk their minds because the managers are there. They already understand the memo, like it's a sign language you guys are talking. But then that is where you have to go ahead and coach the managers on what
Mm-hmm.
you were trying to do and just use that like an example. They couldn't speak because you
Yep.
were there. If you need information about my team, I'm going to let you know the information and go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm gonna quickly address Portia's question. She said, "How does the manager get the meeting link? Would some companies require us to send the meeting link?" So, no, the links, the invites, you know who they go out through? The Scrum Master. So, if I don't want somebody on that call, the only way they would get the link is if someone forward them the link.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're creating the meetings, it's certain people that need to be on certain calls, certain people that can be invited to certain calls. But that retrospective, the only way they could get that link is if someone on the team send it to them. And if they don't want the managers on the call, I advise everyone not to do that. So just to touch on that. Okay, now we're going to get into the Scrum life cycle. So we're going to look at it, going from vision to deployment. So if you look here, the project vision, that's the idea, right? Then you want to go into release planning. And this, sometimes you could say this is PI planning. You know, how many releases, how many projects, how many features, whatever it is. And I'm not going to go into depth
I was
with
getting ready to say,
everything.
don't confuse them.
Yeah, I'm not going to, yeah, I'm not going to confuse. And then you go into planning, implementation. The daily scrum is always going to be in the implementation, or should I say development. This is the development area. Daily scrum, you're going to have that every day. Then you have the review, what we just touched on. And then you go back into retrospective, and it goes back in full circle until that deployment is ready. So you go straight down, planning, development, and you're checking in while that development is going down or going on, not going down. And then you review what you worked on in a retrospective. Then you just keep that going until the deployment is ready. So that, I know we're way over. I was not a good Scrum Master today. Pia was not a good Scrum Master. She didn't keep me in line. She didn't keep me inside the time box. Claude either. So, so before we end the call, if you are able to turn your camera on, please turn your camera on and give a short who you are, because Pia is new. You already met Claude. Give a short introduction. Let's do 2 minutes. Let's go.
I'll
Who's
go
going
first.
first?
I'll
Go ahead,
first.
Leslie.
My name's Leslie, Navy veteran, currently work for the Postal Service as a supervisor. Trying to get out of that rat race, working 7 days